Hello and welcome to the old Fliers. We recently uploaded a video about thiokol and the solid rocket motors they made for NASA. Solid rocket fuels will burn until completion, although shaping of the fuel reduces thrust at max Q.
The three liquid fuel main engines now throttling back to 72% of rated performance, going into the bucket, reducing the stress on the shuttle as it breaks through the sound barrier.
Max Q is the height of about 36,000 feet when the rocket is subjected to the greatest aerodynamic stress. The thrust from the three liquid-fueled cryogenic rocket engines are controllable. At max Q, thrust is reduced simply by closing valves. Recent launches used liquid hydrogen as a cryogenic fuel and liquid oxygen as the oxidizer. Having oxygen present is vital, as its absence in space wouldn't allow combustion. The Russians tried liquefied natural gas as the fuel in the Tu-155 aircraft in 1989. The disadvantages of a cryogenic system is that the storage tanks must be able to withstand high pressure, so have thicker walls and stronger alloys are needed. This makes the vehicle tanks heavier, thereby reducing performance. It was in 1935 that German Helmuth Walter discovered a fuel oxidizer combination that spontaneously ignited. Professor Otto Lutz developed the fuel C-Stoff, which is 30% hydrazine hydrate, 57% methanol and 13% water. The oxidizer used, T-Stoff, was high-strength peroxide. C-Stoff became the first of many hypergolic propellants. The main advantages of hypergolic propellants are that they can be stored as liquids at room temperature and that engines which are powered by them are easy to ignite reliably and repeatedly. Most hypergolic propellants are difficult to handle due to their extreme toxicity or corrosiveness. These are very volatile and capable of exploding with inattention. The world's first rocket motor aircraft was the Me-163 Comet. It could reach extraordinary speeds. It came too late to affect the outcome of World War II. British test pilot Captain Eric Brown flew the Me-163 Comet and was aware of the dangers of its fuel. He was also aware that when the fuel was exhausted, you had one go at landing. For him, that was a crash landing.
You're landing on a skid, and you cannot afford to land on runways with that. You've got to land on grass. And it's a little unstable on one skid. So Farnborough, we had with some captured German scientists who wanted to devise a transonic fighter for research. And they, in their design, they had twin skids, but which retracted beautifully into the fuselage. So the landing speed of the aircraft was estimated at 160 miles an hour. Now the landing speed on the 163 is, I would say, about 100 to 110. You're coming in at 125 and you ease off and it plonks down. So there was a gap there. And they wanted me just to push up the landing speed and see if it would hold tight. So we chose a large grass landing field at RAF Wittering, and started off at about 130 miles an hour, moving up to 158 when the skid collapsed at 158. And two things happened. When it collapsed, the aircraft toppled over on the left wing, started veering off to the left, and the main skid, came straight up through the cockpit, caught my legs and took them up. I was very fortunate. If it had just gone on with them, I think I'd have lost my legs. But
hypergolic propellants were discovered independently for the second time in the US by the Guggenheim Aeronautical Laboratory researchers in 1940. They developed engines powered by an aniline and red fumic nitric acid. The corrosivity, toxicity, and carcinogenicity of these propellants necessitated expensive safety precautions. Failure to follow adequate safety procedures with this dangerous nitric acid propellant mixture, nicknamed Devil's Venom, for example, resulted in the deadliest rocketry accident in history. In 1960, a Russian rocket exploded as it was being prepared, killing more than 50 people, now known as the Nedlin catastrophe. Then there was the Titan IBM that exploded in its silo in 1980 in Arkansas. An Air Force repairman dropped a wrench which bounced off the base of the silo, puncturing the fuel cell of the rocket. The subsequent explosion blew a 740-ton silo door 600 feet.
Yeah, you heard me right. The missile exploded, but the warhead did not. And to understand what happened in the 1980 Damascus Titan II explosion, first we have to understand what was in the silo. The fuel that allows you to store a Titan II missile fully fueled is a mix of hydrazine and dinitrogen tetroxide. It's called a hypergolic propellant. These types of fuels use two components, a fuel and an oxidizer, which ignite when they come into contact. Now, the advantage of hypergolic propellants is that they can be stored in liquid form at room temperature, and they can be easily and reliably ignited. An airman who was part of a team doing a routine pressure check on the second stage of the missile accidentally dropped the socket from a 3-foot-long ratchet. The approximately 8-pound socket head dropped some 80 feet, bounced off a thrust mount, and struck the rocket's first stage, piercing its skin and causing it to leak Aerozine-50 fuel.
Yes, these propellants pack a punch. The Air Force later disclosed there had been 125 accidents at Titan sites. The earliest ballistic missiles, such as the Soviet R-7 that launched Sputnik 1, and the US Atlas and Titan I used kerosene and liquid oxygen. The difficulties of storing a cryogenic like liquid oxygen in a missile that had to be kept at launch ready for months or years at a time led to a switch to hypergolic propellants in the US. The difficulties of such corrosive and toxic materials, including injury-causing leaks and explosions, led to their near universal replacement with solid fuel boosters, first in Western submarine-launched ballistic missiles, and then in land-based US and Soviet ICBMs. Hypergolically fueled rocket engines are usually simple and reliable because they need no ignition system. As hypergolic rockets do not need an ignition system, they can fire any number of times by simply opening and closing the propellant valves until the propellants are exhausted. The most common hypergolic fuels, hydrazine, monomethylhydrazine, and unsymmetrical dimethylhydrazine and oxidizer nitrogen tetroxide, are all liquid at ordinary temperatures and pressures. Other chemicals have been proposed as fuels and oxidizers. How about chlorine trifluoride oxidizer? This is known to burn concrete and gravel. Not for the faint-hearted.
Well, that's because chlorine trifluoride is a more powerful oxidizing agent by mass than oxygen itself, meaning it's capable of rapidly oxidizing things that would normally be considered practically impossible to set aflame, like asbestos.
Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. This will help the channel.